I think it's become more and more obvious over the last few years now that there is a large disconnect that's been forming in the gaming industry, specifically between the gamers and the higher ups and executives at many of these different gaming companies. And with a recent interview that's now been published with Sean Layden, that's worked to highlight this further, as well as some troubling data that shows the numbers aren't necessarily backing up the vision that these executives have for the industry and sort of the direction that they're pushing in, because these numbers do not look good for them there. But we'll go over all of that here today. So if you guys enjoyed the video, hit the like button, subscribe if you're new. So let's start over here. This is the interview with Sean Layden and gamesindustry.biz. And here he talked about a few things with the industry, which Sean Layden is an advisor for a few different companies, notably Tencent being the big one. So when he starts talking about this stuff, it's definitely worth paying attention to, because he's giving us some insight or a small window into, I think, how some of these larger companies are also thinking and strategizing and sort of where they are with some of this stuff. All right. So when asked about $80, he did note that the cost of premium games had stayed the same for the past 20 years, despite the combination of increased development costs and inflation. However, why haven't people gone to $80? All these companies, he says, I think it's because everyone's afraid. No one wants to be the first one to raise the price because you're afraid to lose traffic. So what you do is just end up eating into your operating income or your profit margin. Goes on to say there were more sports cars in parking lot in the PS1 era than there were in the PS4 era. Because if you're selling 20 million units at $6 for something that only costs you $10 million to make, that's different than selling 20 million units at $6, something that costs you $160 million to make. Now, the PS1 era is mentioned here, and it was not common to sell 20 million copies of something in the PS1 era. Hundreds of thousands of copies was considered successful even back then, though. I mean, it had a lot to do with going to the CD medium that saved them quite a bit of money compared to cartridges, which were ridiculously expensive. But that was a really good era, that PS1 era, for some of these companies, because they could fit a lot of data on a disc and not have to spend a stupid amount of money for literally a circuit board they put in a piece of plastic to then sell to you. So the PS1 era, you sell 500,000 copies. You're probably having throwing a parade in the office at that time. Whereas now, that studio is probably gone tomorrow if you sell 500,000 copies. But he does talk a bit about this in the sense that the developers, as he's implying, would have sports cars. But the thing that I think we're all becoming very aware of, especially it's much more transparent now than it was during the PS1 era, and even during the PS4 era, where people are catching on to the idea that, wow, there's a whole system that the money has to trickle through to then get to the developers. And what we end up seeing most times are the developers just get laid off. It's constant now. I mean, think about the last 12 months. That's been the news pretty consistently that I've had in Newswave. It's like, okay, well, there's layoffs here, there's layoffs there. And then we get to the end of the year, it's like thousands and thousands of people have been laid off. But then you see a lot of the CEOs, for example, Andrew Wilson had $30 million in compensation for last year. But just CEOs across the board there, especially in the tech industry, I mean, I think a median CEO compensation was like 17 or 18 million. So I feel like a lot of people are just becoming much more aware of, okay, even if a game comes out and sold really well, how much money is going to the developer really? Because the real premium right now seems to be just job security. That's the big thing. It's not necessarily, oh, now I can go buy this new Corvette. It's like, okay, I can go to work on Monday still. Now, Sean Layden does say that the game should have increased in price with every new generation, but that instead the industry's mantra has been, as long as we grow, even though we're not making money, somehow we can't die. And so I was trying to think of when he would have started, and I guess it would have been with the PS1 era, which if you go back to that point, you'd see games for $40 to $50 typically. Sometimes more. There's a multi-disc game. It could be higher than that, but it would average out to like that $45 to $50 range, somewhere in there. So I guess if we started there and went from PS1 to PS2 I guess should have been 60, and then 360 PS3 would have been 70, then PS4 and Xbox One would have been 80, and now we would have been at $90 games for the PS5. We're at 80 technically because Nintendo pushed for Mario Kart World to get there, but Microsoft tried their hand with Outer Worlds 2, and they had to go back to 70, probably because no one was pre-ordering it. I mean, that's the logical step that you would take. You'd lower the price or something and try to sell more of it. So at this time, we have that $180 game. We'll see what happens with something like Grand Theft Auto 6. I feel like a lot of people right now in the industry are just waiting to see what that's going to be priced at. But for now, I guess that would be the belief. At very least, he would think that we'd at least be at $80 across the board right now, and we would be legitimately discussing that $100 game in the future already. And again, GTA 6 has come up for that. I think that might be pushing it. I think GTA 6 will be $80 personally. I think that's what they're going to go for. Maybe they'll surprise me and they'll go with the strategy that I'll be talking about here soon to sell more copies of it. But he says the cost of construction is just way too high. If you're going to spend over $200 million to build a game, your margins are super tight unless you can expect to sell 25 million units. Unless you're Rockstar, you should not expect to sell 25 million units. Yeah, again, Rockstar, GTA 6, it's its own thing. It's an outlier. You can't really plan around that if you're another publisher, as in, wow, we can also do that. You really can. There are very few companies that can. Well, okay, so Nintendo probably could get away with it for a Zelda game or a big Mario game. Those are the kinds of things that you can look at and say, that feels like an outlier. You could have Sony with the next big God of War game. You know, that would work. Gran Turismo, that would probably work with how that sells. So that what I mean is there are very few instances of it's like a slam dunk, no sweat, we're getting 15 to 20 million sold out of this thing. However, the budgets constantly come up, right? And the question then becomes, okay, if costs keep going up because developers keep getting paid more, which they do, I mean, they'll get paid more with inflation. This is kind of how it works across the board. What do you do? Well, he was quick to respond, and that's good because I definitely would have been bringing this up otherwise. Said they've already been kind of moving the median price point up anyway, and he's aware of this. He was there at Sony when it was happening too. You know, that's just the base price has been rising, but there are so many other things that push the price up outside of that. Microtransactions, deluxe editions, battle passes. I mean, there's season passes, early access. Now that's a big thing, isn't it? Games are kind of $80 if you want to be there 2 days in advance or something, or maybe it's $20 more for a week. That seems to be the new strategy now. They have a good release date in mind and they kind of push it back 2 days and they get 10 or $20 extra on top of it. So that's the thing that gets me about all of this. Games have been more than, you can even say $60 because the 360 and the PS3 era was great because it got everyone connected and we had digital distribution and stuff. And it was also kind of bad because it got everyone connected and it got digital distribution. It really is that double-edged sword to where you don't have things like cheat codes anymore because those are sold to you. Experience boosters, that would have been something you would have input a certain combination at the title screen, you would have heard a sound, and then all of a sudden you're one-shotting everything and you're getting millions of experience and, oh, wow, this is pretty cool. I can just have some fun with this. Not the case anymore. You got to spend a little more money to accelerate the experience points there. So the idea here, the vision is that game prices just need to keep going up. And that's the thing, keep going up. I don't even know if there's necessarily a roof in mind for the executives or any of the people running these companies, but there's certainly a roof in mind for gamers out there, consumers, people who just want to buy games and play them. There's definitely a spot where they go, maybe I don't need this right now. And you know what it kind of feels like? It kind of feels like it's $80. And look, it'll be tested with GTA 6, as I said, but I have some questions as to where Mario Kart World is going to sell when it's not part of a bundle and it comes in at the $50 difference there. It's just, when you go up $10, it doesn't sound like a lot, but then you think about it a bit more and you're like, okay, how many games then over the course of the generation at 80 would I be buying? And what would that end up coming out to at the end, right? And there's also the thought of I'm taking a chance on any of these purchases now because it's just not guaranteed. So we have these expectations of companies that continue to rise and they seem insurmountable for studios. One example was, it's been memed to death now, but it's Square Enix. And here's like Tomb Raider. I remember this one very, very well, right? Tomb Raider sold 3.4 million copies and it failed to hit expectations. This was in 2013, by the way. So we're talking about stuff now. This was 12 years ago. which I mean, that's wild to think about. What happened though was Square Enix had like their fiscal quarter, I believe. And what happened was they had Hitman Absolution, Sleeping Dogs, and Tomb Raider 2013. They just piled it together and they were looking for a certain number, a 14.9 million retail game sales, not digital, counted in that. And they came out to 8.75 between 3 games. And Tomb Raider sold 3.4 million copies in 4 weeks to help out and try to get it there. That's just, those are the meme-worthy Square Enix expectations. I know. But this kind of, I mean, I wish I could go back in time. This was like completely foreshadowing the industry now and how companies can come out, sell millions of copies, and it's a disappointment. And then you hear about how all of a sudden that studio is just, turn 10 is cut in half. It's like, oh, wow, okay, jeez. They were rolling with Microsoft. Well, I mean, Microsoft's most popular games ever made, really, at that point with the Forza franchise. So now the thing we have to think about, especially if you're a bit older, for me, I think about games as you buy the product, you go home, you play it. Maybe it's a single player game, you play through it. If it's multiplayer, you play online with some friends. Maybe there's a campaign. Remember those days? There was a campaign with your multiplayer game. Boxed it. It was crazy, right? It was right there with the manual. But it's pretty straightforward transaction. Now it's completely different. There are so many things that can pull your attention. Back with the PS1, PS2 days, you went to the store and what was there is what you bought. But then we got more connected, and now everything pulls your attention. It's not even just video games competing with video games. It's like streaming. It's social media. There's so much stuff happening. And I saw this and I thought, that's not good. So this was shared by Matt Piscatella over on his social media account. He says, video game spend among 18 to 24-year-olds is down sharply. So this would be the Gen Z. And young grads are having a much tougher time finding jobs, student loan payments are restarting for millions of borrowers, credit card delinquency rates have risen, naming a lot of the stuff right now in just the economic climate that would be causing people to not have as much disposable income. But also, I just think there are other things, like you can see here, video games down almost 25% in 18 to 24-year-olds. So when I see that, right, so I guess I'd be considered millennial. And my age group came up with the internet first. Like, we remember when the internet came around. Okay. And yeah. And I remember when the internet went from dial-up to broadband, and then we're like super speed broadband. It's crazy. But back then in high school, we would just be on Newgrounds. You know, that's where it was. Social media, I missed that completely in high school, which is great. If you're in high school now, man, I have a ton of sympathy. That is crazy to go through high school with Instagram and Facebook and Twitter X, TikTok, and all this stuff. It's like it never ends. Back when I was in school, you'd leave on Friday and you were gone for 2 days. You did not necessarily have to interact with people if you didn't want to, who were at school. And then you go back on Monday and have to deal with it. But it's like it never ends. It's crazy. So with that in mind, though, the point is a lot of gamers now coming up have other things they can play or do. So one of those things would be free-to-play titles. And Sony has already told us that half their market on PlayStation Network is like the revenue that comes in is made up of those games. It's the other half. So it's like 53% are free-to-play games. The microtransactions, the extra spend beyond just downloading it is what they're getting that money from. The other 47% are the premium priced games, the games you actually buy and you play, and that's it, right? Single player games, that kind of thing. And so now I'm seeing those be overtaken by the free-to-play games. And then you start to realize, yeah, you know what? 18 to 24-year-olds, they're probably not necessarily sitting there with a ton of additional income that they can just throw around and buy the more expensive games. And then here come the $80 games, you know, and that's kind of the situation you run into. And that's the biggest thing here that Sean Layden touched on with maybe, I don't know if you realize or not, no one wants to be the first one to raise the price because you're afraid to lose traffic. That's what would happen. Is people just stop buying the games. So they'll find other things to do. They'll play Fortnite. They'll play Apex Legends. They'll play Call of Duty Warzone. And they'll be content with it because those have become very much social experiences for them with their friends. So it's kind of a way for them to hang out while also playing games and just chatting back and forth, online. So what happens now is these games continue to go up and up and up in price, and people get priced out, and then they grow up not necessarily even relying on premium price games to play like we did back with the PS2 and even the earlier 360 PS3 days, like going to midnight releases and stuff. That's all gone. Sean Layden did also push back a bit on the idea of subscription services, namely Game Pass, and he doesn't seem to like the idea of this subscription service existing and training customers on that platform to not buy games. That has been something that's been coming up for a while. However, I actually like Game Pass quite a bit, specifically because it does give at least people out there who like this is a great path for them to play games at more affordable price of say $20 a month for all the new titles and stuff that come out from Microsoft, and even some interesting indie titles, then occasionally a Claire Obscure Expedition 33 that drops in. But I like it because it's also very disruptive in the market. It does feel like something where, they're adapting to the current environment, which we just went over, where a younger generation coming in doesn't necessarily have the money to go out and buy $80 games, $70 games constantly. Yes, Microsoft is kind of taking a bet saying, okay, it's $20 a month, so we are going to bet that we will get $240 a year from you, which would be more than maybe you would spend on games throughout the year otherwise. But looking at it from the perspective of someone who maybe subscribes for a couple of months, maybe over the course of a summer, for example, it's a pretty good deal and it's a good option. Doesn't necessarily keep people from buying games, though, because this is something people tend to forget a lot. You could still buy games on the Xbox. Just because you have Game Pass doesn't mean you can't go, oh, wow, I would like to have that game. And then you go out like I did and bought Claire Obscure Expedition 33 physically. And trust me, I know there's a whole conversation around how this works into video game economics and developers' compensation. And is this good for the long-term health of the industry? I get all that. But right now, looking at it from the side of gamers who maybe are trying to save money versus, as we've seen a lot higher ups and executives and publishers trying to take a ton of money from gamers. Yeah, I mean, Game Pass makes a ton of sense in the world for the customers. And while we're on the topic of this Game Pass subscription service being detrimental to the gaming industry when it comes to buying habits, you kind of have to look over at the free-to-play section as maybe being more influential right now, because it does bring in more than half of the revenue based on Sony's recent financial report for their entire storefront on the PlayStation. So that to me seems like a bigger market mover than Game Pass existing. And so I think about what could be done here, and it's interesting. I do believe that we had a bit of a disruptor earlier this year, and I feel like some of these companies had to have noticed this with Expedition 33. That is a game that came out, and it's $50, right? It's one of the best rated games of the year. People are super happy with it. They are happy. That being the team that made it, and then the publisher and stuff. They're all happy with more than 3 million copies that's sold and all of this. None of this computes, by the way, with everything we've said here. So they are very much their own outlier from the industry. But you start to think, is it a good idea to go, rather than forward to like $70 or $80, to start thinking more about those $50 experiences from the get-go? Like, as you start creating and developing these games, do you think, okay, let's try to fit within this $50 box and not overextend on budgets? And then maybe, yes, look, we already know what's going to happen with these games. They're going to have post spend where they're going to sell you things. We know this. But if the game comes out at $40 or $50, there is sort of that feeling of, oh, okay, meeting us in the middle with this. It's not $80. Oh, and then look at all these microtransactions. So the idea then being, is it better to sell 4 or 5 copies versus 2? You know, like for every one you sell, would you rather sell 2 at 50 rather than 1 at 80? And most people would answer 2 at 50. So I just think the $50 price point makes a lot of sense, especially right now, because I'm not even someone who's really that interested in everything going free to play and it's super easy to get in, but then you could spend thousands of dollars on microtransactions. Like, nah, I don't really want those experiences. But I did like the Claire Obscure Expedition 33 experience. That was good. And it was $50, and I played it on Game Pass, and you know what I did? I was like, let me get the physical copy at $50, and I picked that up. So that to me, I think should be the strategy going forward. But I think it's so disconnected right now that a lot of these companies, especially some of the higher ups, are just waiting. They're waiting to go to 80. They're just, where's GTA 6? Get them in here so we can, if they push for 90, we'll come in at 80. You know, that's waiting for that to be normalized because, well, 70 kind of became normalized. So eventually maybe 80 will. Unless that really is that breaking point in terms of the price, and it just never will be. But I was thinking about this a lot, seeing these things pop up, and then also seeing the data from the younger generation coming in who maybe aren't as interested in just going out and buying the $80 game, even the $70 game day one, because, well, they can just play Fortnite. So let me know what you guys think about this, though, down below in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.